and I'd like to re-invite another speaker to join us on the panel for the final session. Louise Tumchewics will rejoin us. Louise talked this morning to us in the first session on great power competition, and we zoomed in and covered Ukraine as well a little. Louise, as a reminder, is visiting fellow Department of War Studies, King's College London. Thank you so much for rejoining us, Louise. And may I start with Louise? This morning we touched on Ukraine and developments, and Nikki touched on Ukraine and the grain, the bread basket, grain basket of the world, not only Europe. And you have a you're following closely the grain convoys and transport from Ukraine, and there are ongoing negotiations on, I don't know if they're being extended or not, as much as a fertilizer, possibly as well. Can you give us a quick update, a review and a brief outlook on how Ukraine is impacting on school feeding programs potentially? Thank you.
Thanks, Joachim, and thank you, Nikki, for your presentation as well. I think July is the deadline for the renegotiation of the so-called grain deal for grain to leave Ukrainian ports. I think given the recent events in Russia, we certainly could see a continued or a reinitiated blockade and much more difficulty getting grain out of Ukraine, and Russia being much less cooperative. I think we also have to consider the relationship with Turkey here as well, and there was certainly there are great and medium power politics influencing this as well. Certainly Russia had an interest in supporting Erdogan in his re-election because the maintenance of the status quo in Turkey was very much in Russia's interest. Now that he has been safely re-elected, there isn't quite that same need to keep him in power. He'll be in power for a while, and we could see Russia proving to be much more difficult in allowing grain to leave Ukraine. And of course, the subsequent effects of that will be quite dramatic for countries where Mary's Meals is working. If there is a significant rise in the price of grain, and also the price of things like sunflower oil and other ingredients, and a rise in the price of fertilizer and shortages of fertilizer. So seeing conditions becoming even more challenging in countries that really have depended on cheap grain imports and access to fertilizer.
Nikki, do you see it becoming more difficult, increasingly difficult, or has it plateaued? As well, the 22 euros has potentially gone up over the last year, or will go further up. So this might be another challenge. Do you think this has do you have it under control, or do you think it will get worse over the next 6 to 12 months? What is your anticipation? How do you forward planning?
I mean, I think it's a bit like here. You get used to it after a while. So because you start in the first moment, of course, it's the biggest difficulty because you have to adapt and to adjust everything. We had a long-term agreement with our producers, so we were not really affected of the price raises in the first moment. But of course, we see that also for them, we cannot keep the same prices because they rely on us too. So actually, it's absolutely true what you said. We had to, just a few months ago, we were delivering the same product with 18 euros 30 per year. So it's a huge jump, of course, on 22 euro, which is, of course, I mean, if it's only like €3.70 or something. So in absolute terms, it's not so much money. But for us, it is like 20 more percent. We need 20 more percent money to be able to feed the exact same amount of children. And so this is for us a real challenge, because we see our work really as a long-term commitment. And once we take a school or a whole region or a community in our project, we really give them the assurance that we will be there, and not only just like hopping, because many organizations do that, and so sometimes they're quite frustrated, the people, and they don't believe you anymore, because they have seen so many people just coming and going. And what we do with Mary's Meals is what we say, okay, once we're there, you can really be sure that we will stay. And if COVID is coming, if we had a crisis, we had local conflicts, like in South Sudan, for instance, and we never backed out, actually. And so this is really important, and it's the first time in the history of Mary's Meals, I must admit, where we're facing a real challenge where we see, okay, we are not sure that we are going to be able to continue, well, to deliver to these people we have making this promise to. And this is, of course, a great, it's important for us. So we'll see how it works out.
Yeah. And you looking back at what Mary's Meals has achieved in terms of how many children were fed at school, and some of them must have gone through the school system and finished their education over the last 5 to 10 years. Am I potentially right assuming that thanks to Mary's Meal and having not to worry about where the next meal comes from and have an education, that these children who are now potentially in employment or local employment or have a career, they stay where they're at home and are less likely than others, more desperate people in other conflict zones, to potentially seek immigration or contemplate immigration and try to reach the shores of so-called fortress Europe. So I'm tempted to posit having a school feed program in the right places, in the most desperate places, is a very good solution to potentially immigration problem. Could you see that as similar, or am I over-interpreting?
No, I think you're absolutely right. And it's what we see, because of course you must be very desperate to leave your home, to leave your family, your country, to know on what hazardous routes you're going to go. And of course they know what are the dangers. So actually, I think nobody would do it just like this because they think maybe there's more money in Germany than at home. So it's really out of desperation. So I would absolutely agree what you say, that giving a real basic, an education, giving possibilities to stay at home and to this also the development of the country. It's long term, but it's what they need actually, and it's as you said, it's very nice for us to see that, because now we have like 2-3 generations of children who went through schools and now and we see actually the benefit for all of them. So of course, not all of them are genius or are the best ones. And not all of them are going to be the big, I don't know what, in the economy or in the politics. But you have, there's a benefit for all the children. For those who are going to get back on the fields, like all the generations before, at least they know how to read and to write and to count. And you cannot, they know how to read a contract, for instance. So you cannot, just like do everything you want with them anymore. They can learn how to work on their fields in a better way, which is also better for the soil and things like that. And of course, you give the possibility for the more gifted of the children to come out of this. And we have, like, for instance, a girl, her name is Veronica. She was one of the first children who got Mary's Meals in Malawi by that time. And now she completed her law school, and she is one of the managers of a big company there. So it's very nice to see. And she says herself, actually, because both her parents were dead, she wouldn't have had the opportunity to go to school. And that would be such a pity, actually. And we have many, many examples like this. For instance, also Jimmy from Haiti. He was born in one of the most dangerous parts of the world, actually, in Cité Soleil. It's a terrible place with such a nice name. And he grew up there, and many, many children just die because they're taken. You have many armed conflicts and things like that. And so they just die because they're on the street, and the moment somebody shoots them, something like that. And he was from one of the very, very poorest families, and he's now quite well-known musician. He does... And anyway, and he says also, actually, he knows that he would have ended up in a gang, that was for sure, because there's no other possibilities for children. And having an education and discovering his gift as a musician, now he's doing like, I don't know what, I think what kind of music, but he's quite well known in Haiti. And these are the little stories. We're quite happy when you hear about it, and we don't always hear it, because many of the children we lose track, but due to these stories we know the effects of this school feeding. It's great.
Thank you. And may I bring in Louise back, who talked this morning about great power competition. If you look at the aspects of great powers and their relationship to developing countries or the poorest countries of this world, is there any other different views, other different ways for great powers to deal with the poorest countries of this world? Is there anything which is sort of popping up during your research or your experience you could share with us?
I would say that often the track record for great powers in developing countries, particularly in many of the countries where Mary's Meals has worked, has not always been positive. In fact, we could say it is not positive. And we do see great power politics and ambition negatively impacting countries of the global south. So if we look at, say, for instance, China has been very active in parts of Africa to secure supplies of lithium and cobalt and other minerals. This comes at a huge cost to the local environment, but they will not be striving to meet ESG goals in the hiring of local people. And that kind of resource extractive activity is something that has quite a long history. It isn't just the United States, China, and Russia that have been involved in that. This goes back centuries, and we have seen the effects of that in local economies, in local governments, and even the way, say, the continent of Africa is divided. Presently, we do see, say, Russia's infamous Wagner Group being very active in regional conflicts, particularly in Africa. They have a large presence in the Central African Republic, in Mali, throughout the continent, where they are used to promote interests through the support of one faction in a conflict over another. This is an old story, of course. This really was a feature of the Cold War in both Latin America and Africa and Southeast Asia, where you have the support between great powers, supporting one side and supporting the other, and using a regional conflict as a sort of a proxy conflict, and that that unfortunately continues.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just add something, Joy, because I don't know if you heard about this conference in Paris just a few days ago, led by Emmanuel Macron, who it was called. Well, actually, the idea was to make a more fairer climate of investment, also. And it was. I thought it was quite interesting because it was the first time that he acknowledged, just before what I talked before, the effects of climate change on the countries of the global south, and the necessity for our countries, our more wealthy countries, to to give them the possibility to deal with this in a better way, because. And this is just what I wanted to add to your point, which is really important, but. Sometimes it is necessary that you have a real dangerous situation, like the climate change, or also like what you said before about the people just trying to migrate to Europe, because then it forces our countries to think about a bit more generously, not because they're so generous, but because it's their own interest.
It becomes an urgency, or it's more at home. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Any questions from the floor? Anyone who wants to engage on this topic? Okay. Anything you want to contribute, Louise? Anything else you picked up on the presentation you thought it's worth expanding on? You might have liked the map, the heat map, and you already compared it to the great power competition.
Goodness, I think there's a lot, a lot that we could expand on here. We do see, obviously, the impact of a conflict in Europe, a great power competition on countries of the global south, but. I think there's also the realization that for people who are struggling to feed their children, a conflict in Europe may not be their immediate priority, and that might not be something that is forms a part of their consciousness, and for their country's leadership might not be something that is a political priority for them. And I think what's been quite striking about the past year and a half is that we have had countries of the global south who don't see this as a priority, and who have questioned, say, the warm reception that European refugees have received in contrast to refugees from elsewhere in the world, and where they have declined where countries have declined to take a stand on either side of the conflict, whether that's abstaining in UN votes or continuing to have relationships with both sides, and can certainly see where for countries of the global south a conflict between Russia and Ukraine will be secondary to them, with the need to provide affordable food for their population. Because a population that's hungry is not always a population that is stable, and hunger leads to all kinds of pervasive problems in society.
Thank you. Thank you. And a last question to you, Nikki. At the moment, there are 18 countries where Marius Meal is working, and the price for a year for feeding a child is 22 euros. Where do you see it in 5 years' time? If the 22 euros stay as it is, are you planning to increase the numbers of countries? Where do you see other hotspots, poorest countries evolving? Is there anything on your wish list you would love to cover but you can't at the moment?
Well, actually, we had a great agenda. We thought that maybe in 5 years we could be feeding over 3 million children, and then 5 million children, and it was quite realistic, actually, and we have already make the assessment with many schools who are really waiting, and all the process, which is quite a long process in the beginning, is done. But we cannot take them into the program because, what I said before, because of the lack of
So there's a waiting list.
So yes, so we have to see, and we have to go step by step. And of course, there's such a need, and we get asked from many regions of the world. So I think for now we're going to stick where we are, and to the and our goal is really to be able, as I said before, to keep really doing our work in the best possible way where we are.
Yeah.
I think there was a question.
Oh, excuse me, I have not seen. There's a question on the floor.
Yeah.
Yeah, Achim, please.
I wonder how you manage it that there's no fraud when you send money to a country to buy this food. Because when I've been to the European Commission and there was a department that was looking for fraud on their behalf, they had a lot of them. So when they sent money somewhere and that was taken to buy something else and all this stuff. So how you manage it to get the right people on your company organization?
Thanks for this question, because I'm quite happy to be able to answer it, because we really have very, very few problems with, I think I talked with you before about it, with thefts and frauds and corruption. And the main reason, I think, is because we are really grassroots and we are part of the community. In the beginning, we never started a project without we having talked longly with the community, with the chief or any people there, so that they realize that we're not going just to come and to provide the food and to do the things and the good white people saviors thing, but that it's their project. And so, as you said before, with the volunteers, if you're the mother doing the volunteering, and you know that if something is missing, tomorrow it's your own child who's not going to have anything to eat, then there is a huge internal control. And it's really amazing to see, actually, that even if something disappears sometimes, oops, it reappears then again, because the people went to the guy and said, okay, I noticed you have a new watch, how is this possible? And suddenly it's there again. And we don't have to do so much. We try, of course, because we feel also a commitment towards all the people who give us them and trust us their money. So we feel it's important to really see on site that it really, just as you said, that the things arrive where they should. So we have like a control mechanisms, and every school is visited twice a week to an indefinite time of the day. And so we have, and these are people who are, because as I said before, many of the things are done by volunteers, but this is things where we pay the people for, so to be really sure that they know they can lose their jobs if they don't do it properly. So they go with a bike in the end of the country. Sometimes it's on the countryside, very remote, and they go there twice a week, unexpected, and look at they check the
supplies.
The supplies. They look at the list of the volunteers. They look also at the list of the teachers. Have they really been there? And so it's very nice, because this is also a side effect that I heard when I was inside, that they said actually many more teachers, because of course they're not really very well educated, the teachers. Their salaries are very small, so many times they don't come to school. And knowing that there is those controls, they come also very much more regularly. So this is also a nice little side effect. Yeah.
If you pass on the microphone, Achim, please. Thank you.
Who has Mary's Meal founded? Just to be curious.
The founder, the Gründer.
The founder. The founder actually is in Scotland. It's named Magnus MacFarlane Barrow. And I like this story very much, actually, because he was not, you know, he's not a politician, he's not an expert in any way, and nothing would have, you know, he normally he would have done something very different of his life, but he always had also already as a when he was at school himself. They organized, by that time there was the war in Bosnia, and he and his brothers and sisters, they organized some trucks to bring goods to Bosnia. And so then the war ended, and he started studying, and actually he started then working in a fish farm, so really nothing to do with big development work and humanitarian work. And one day, at the place of his parents, came a guy who was working in Malawi, and he said, "Magnus, you have been doing these trucks, so you have to come and help me, because there's a big famine, and the children of my project, they're just dying of hunger before me on the street." And Magnus said, "Well, you know, it's very different to make a truck and to put some food in it and to drive it to Bosnia, and I have no idea of the work." And which I find very nice, because many times when I've been working before with the GIZ, and so we come and we have the feeling we know everything, and we know your problem, and we know the solutions most of all. And so he went there finally. And said, "Okay, I'm going to have a look, and if I can help, of course I'm there." And so he went from, he visited people on set, and he went from one her and finally he ended up in the hut of a young mother of 5, and her oldest son, and she would know, actually, the father had died of AIDS 1 year before, and she was dying herself. And so Magnus ended up talking with the eldest son, who was Edward, was 13, and who knew that a few weeks later he would have to provide for his 4 siblings, and with nothing actually. And so Magnus talked with him. I don't know if I already told you the story, because I think it's very moving. It says a lot about Mary's meal, so that's why I'm sorry. I hope it's not too long. But anyway. So he talked with this child, and he asked him, "What are your plans? What are your dreams for your life?" Saying that to a guy who's well, I think it's quite an amazing question. I would never have asked a question like that. And Edward just thought a second, and then he said, "Well, my dream would be to have every day to have something to eat, and maybe one day to be able to go to school." And this coming from a 13-year-old, and Magnus said, "Well, this is the only dream of this child. I mean, it's terrible on one hand. And on the other hand, hearing that, he said, okay, that's it. That's what we're going to do, as simple as it is." So really, and he always said that the idea of Mary's Meals was really inspired by the words of this child. And then they started, as I said before, in one school with 300 children, and now it's like it is. And Magnus was he was like, now he got some recognitions. He was like a hero of the year of the CNN, and he's got the order of I don't know what from the Queen, and so many things. And he's a totally simple guy with 6 children himself, and yeah, quite impressive.